We live in a world of numbers, debt, inflation, currency devaluation. To many, these are modern problems, signs of our complex, fragile economy. But what if I told you this story isn't new? What if the greatest empire in history fell not because of barbarians or plagues, but because of a money crisis, one that started slowly, silently, and then consumed everything? This is the story of Rome, and whether we realize it or not, we are walking in its footsteps. At its height, the Roman Empire was an economic marvel. Stretching from the rainy highlands of Scotland to the deserts of Syria, it united over 60 million people under a single system of law, language, and currency. The denarius, a small silver coin, was the heartbeat of this system. First minted around 211 BC, it was nearly pure silver, reliable and trusted from Britannia to Egypt. This trust was everything. Soldiers were paid in it, taxes were collected in it, trade flowed because of it. But Rome's financial system wasn't just built on coins, it rested on three invisible pillars. 1. Productive taxation. Rome didn't just take, it gave back. Taxes funded roads, aqueducts, courts, and security. In return, citizens and provinces accepted Roman rule. 2. Military expansion. Every new conquest brought enslaved people, gold, grain, and land. This plunder fueled the treasury and kept the engine running. 3. Trust in money. The denarius was a promise, a piece of the empire's credibility you could hold in your hand. But what happens when those pillars begin to crack? Our story turns in the 2nd century AD. Emperor after emperor faced the same dilemma. The empire was vast, but expensive. Legions had to be paid. Border walls had to be built. The people expected bread and circuses, free grain and public games to keep them content. So Rome made a fateful choice. Instead of cutting spending or raising taxes openly, they began to quietly dilute the silver in the denarius. It started small. Under Emperor Nero in 64 AD, the silver content dropped from nearly 100% to about 90%. Reasonable, maybe, a temporary measure, they said. But once the pattern began, it continued. By the time of Emperor Septimius Severus, around 200 AD, the denarius was only 50% silver, and by the crisis years of the 3rd century, some coins contained less than 5% silver. They were bronze cores washed in a thin silver coating. Now you might think, it's just metal. Does it really matter? It mattered because trust is a fragile thing. Imagine you're a Roman baker. A soldier pays you with a new denarius. It looks right, but it's lighter. It feels wrong. You bite it. It's soft, not pure silver. What do? You start charging more because the coin is worth less. Let's make this real. Meet Marcus. He's a legionary stationed at Hadrian's Wall. In 150 AD, his monthly salary, paid in solid denarii, could buy a new cloak, send money home to his family in Gaul, and still have enough for a good meal at the tavern. But by 250 AD, that same salary, now in debased coins, can barely afford him bread and salted fish. He writes homeless. The army promises a bonus, but pays in the same weak currency. Marcus doesn't understand finance. He doesn't need to. He just knows his labor is worth less every year, and if the army doesn't keep his loyalty, who will? This is where theory becomes painful reality. As coins lost value, prices rose, not slowly, but wildly. Historical records are scarce, but economists estimate that between 200 AD and 300 AD, the cost of grain in Rome increased by over 15,000%. Let me say that again, 15,000%. What does that look like in human terms? A measure of wheat that cost 8 denarii at the start of the crisis cost 120,000 denarii a century later. People carried sacks of coins just to buy dinner.
The empire panicked. Emperors like Diocletian tried to fix it with wage and price controls, decrees that said, you cannot charge more than this. But without trust in the currency, laws couldn't force merchants to lose money. Black markets exploded, shortages followed. Rome's response? Print more money. Across the empire, barter returned. Tax collectors accepted grain, oil, or cloth instead of coins. The rich hoarded the old pure silver denarii, taking good money out of circulation. What was left in the market was the worst currency. Economists call this Gresham's law. Bad money drives out good. But the most dangerous loss wasn't in the markets, it was in the human heart. Trust in Rome's promise eroded. If the emperor's face on a coin couldn't guarantee its value, what else could he not guarantee? Law? Security? The future? And then the taxes rose. To fund the crippling deficits, Rome squeezed the provinces dry. Tax rates hit 25%, sometimes 30% of all produce. Farmers abandoned their lands to avoid tax collectors. The very provinces that fed Rome were now starving because of Rome. This might feel like ancient history, but change the names and the script is unsettlingly familiar. Rome reduced silver in the denarius. Today, central banks engage in quantitative easing, creating new digital money to buy government debt. The mechanism is different, but the effect can be similar. More currency chasing the same goods. Rome's military overspending consumed over 75% of the state budget. Today, the U.S. defense budget is larger than the next 10 countries combined, funded by debt. Rome's elites hoarded real wealth. Today, billionaires invest in hard assets, real estate, gold, Bitcoin as a hedge against currency devaluation. And perhaps the most striking parallel, trust. The denarius collapsed when people stopped believing in its value. Today, many are questioning the long-term value of fiat currencies, money backed not by gold, but by government promise. Are we seeing echoes, or are we hearing a direct warning? Rome did not fall in a day. The crisis was not an event, it was a process of 1,000 small surrenders. By the 5th century, the Western Roman Empire was a hollow shell. Soldiers were paid in salt or grain because coins were worthless. Infrastructure crumbled. Towns shrank. Barbarian invasions were less the cause of collapse and more the final act. They walked through doors that Rome had already opened from the inside. In 476 AD, the last Roman emperor in the West, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed. No great battle ended it, no epic last stand. He was simply retired, and the empire that once ruled the known world faded into history. So what is the lesson here? It's not that history repeats itself literally. We are not Rome. Our technology, institutions, and global economy are far more complex. But human nature hasn't changed. The temptation to print our way out of debt is still here. The short-term thinking that sacrifices long-term stability is still here. The erosion of trust in systems is still here. Rome's story teaches us that an empire's greatest enemy is not the army at its gates, but the slow, silent decay of the values it stands on, especially the value of its money. We have a choice. We can pay attention to the patterns, or we can ignore them, believing this time is different. But as the ruins of Rome remind us, civilizations are not destroyed. They are simply dismantled, piece by piece, coin by coin. And the decision of what we build, or what we lose, starts with understanding the past. It starts with realizing that sometimes the most powerful force in history isn't a sword, it's a single devalued coin and the silent crisis it carries.